Welcome to The Impossible, where we empower others to face the impossible, inspire them to be impossible, and motivate them to do the impossible. I'm Matt, your host, and we are back this week with now two of our former guests here to bring you guys a lot of insight and information on how to fight the impossible, how to face it, how to become impossible yourself, and how to do the impossible in your own life. We've had Danielle previously on the podcast way back. I think it was episode 5 or 6 you were on, telling us her story of how she grew up and came to be involved in fitness and the gym life and everything she's doing now. And we had her daughter Emma on the podcast just last week. You guys can catch her episode. It's an unbelievable story of how she was able to face battles with her mental health and work to overcome them, to now be a person who's dedicating her life to help other people do the same and find her passion and purpose in life. So we are honored to have them both back here, and we're bringing them on the podcast to give you guys a little bit of a different perspective this week. So we wanted to bring each of them back on because when you go through something like mental health battles, a lot of times you can feel alone, like nobody understands what's going on, and you can feel lost. But when you battle those, there are other people who are battling that with you from their own perspective. And so anytime a child battles through mental health and self-harm and thoughts of suicide, their parent will always be battling fights of their own. And Danielle can certainly speak to that. And what's really great is that now Danielle and Emma have gotten to a point where they have formed a unified front in being able to work together to tackle these challenges as they come up. And we think it's an amazing perspective that they can provide for you guys. And so we bring them back on the podcast this week to help anybody who's fighting through this, whether you're a mother, a father, a son, a daughter, brother, sister. We wanted to bring you a perspective that can help you and share some of their insights, some of their skills and strategies that they've learned in battling these challenges to help them overcome them in their own life. And we want you guys to be able to do the same in your lives. So without further ado, thank you, Emma and Danielle, for coming back on this week.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we love having you guys, like the whole Haynes clan. We talked about it a little bit last time, but you guys are just like the coolest people we know. So
you guys need to meet some more people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, Emma's got the red hair.
Yeah.
And she rocks Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
And Danielle, you've always got some like great colors and stuff in your hair as well. Like you guys are just like so cool. Like I don't even have hair. And Austin's like, he used to have some really nice hair actually, and then I think since chemo it's not quite come back, but he does have the beard that he's
you guys
always
could always color
he's
the
always
beards.
rocking that.
Color the beards, get wigs.
Yeah, maybe I don't know maybe if you pull a world record, Emma, this year we'll let you dye our beards whatever color.
Do you remember a couple years ago there was like the glitter beard thing?
Yeah.
It was like a trend.
Yeah.
You could even do that.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, and I will speak for Austin since he's not here. If you pull a world record, we'll let you dye and glitter our beards for any podcast episode you want.
You better be chasing that harder.
Yeah, and that's live on YouTube right now, so it's binding commitment. You're welcome, Austin.
Austin, you don't gotta worry
for not being here. No, I think you've got it within you, like we talked about last time. Like it's, and again, it's the same thing. Like even if it ends up not being something you want to chase, like that's okay. I think the main thing is just being able to open your eyes to your own potential and just the idea of it and knowing that, hey, I've pulled a national record. Like I know that I could chase this if it's something I choose to chase. And vice versa, if you decide, well, that's not for me right now, I want to focus on these other goals. Just knowing that you have that potential within you allows you to be more open-minded to your own potential in other areas. And that's what I think is so fascinating about this whole message. That's why we chase like endurance running and powerlifting, which are like total opposite ends of the spectrum. And so many people give us they don't give us a lot of crap for it, I guess. We've gotten some before, but it's just mostly confusion as like
how?
Why would you do both?
Why? Yeah.
But I think it's just who we are, what we preach, what we say. You know, it's just one of those things. I think Austin and I both know and not that we couldn't if we really put our whole heart and soul into it, but we're never going to be passionate enough about powerlifting or endurance running or any athletics for that matter to be able to chase it to the very, very, very top level. Mm-hmm. We just think that like the amount of work we'd have to put in to try to go there with where our genetics are, and however many limbs we may or may not be missing, it was just, we're not passionate enough about it to chase that.
Yeah.
But I think we both feel really strong mentally, with what we've battled through. And so we know that we can work to go to the top in that realm. So we like to chase it from that perspective. I was talking to a guy about the August meet, and he was telling me about like how his program and his prep and everything's lining up perfectly, and he'll be like deloading the week before and everything and talking through all the specifics. And he asked me what my program looked like. I was just like, I'm going to run a half marathon the week before and then just go out and we'll see what happens.
Hope for the best.
That's what I did last year. It worked out pretty well. So it's, we'll see what happens.
Yep.
But it's just fun. I just love any opportunity to be able to go out and do it, whether I fail the lifts, whether I bomb out of the meet, whether I don't complete the marathon. It's just showing up to go do it. It's just so much fun. And I think I've always felt that way because I felt like this part of my life is just in a way, I don't want to say it's like extra, but it's like maybe like 2.0 is the way I can put it. Because when I was in the hospital and almost lost my life, it really felt in a lot of ways like what the doctors were saying, like I really should have died in that hospital. Like there's still not a good reason for why I'm here and why I can do what I do. And so to me, I thought, well, I don't think it's anything special about me. I think it's just something we all have within us. So if I was supposed to die then I'm just going to appreciate everything I've got now while I've got it, and especially with Lily being here now, it's just like just the most amazing thing. And hope we can introduce her to you guys someday and tell you a little bit more about her, because she just has an unbelievably impossible story. And it's really wild to me, and I know you'll understand this, Danielle. People always tell you, like, especially like before you're a parent and then when you're getting ready to be a parent, like the amount of times we've heard like it'll change your whole life, like, and you just can't describe it.
Yep.
Like, but you just gotta experience it to know it. And I always believed them. Like I always believed everybody who told me that, and so many of our podcast guests told me that. But then it was like it happened.
Yeah.
And it's like, now I know.
You're like, I get it now.
It's just and it's so cool, because I think some people would always describe it as just like all of your priorities change, and then what used to matter to you no longer matters to you anymore. And I never really understood like that perspective of it. And I think for some people, maybe that's truly how they feel, for sure. But the way I described it to Logan is it felt to me like having our daughter just enhanced everything I was doing now. Yeah. Like it makes me appreciate this podcast so much more. It makes me appreciate going out to perform so much more. It makes me appreciate like cleaning the house so much more. Yeah. Because it's like, I want my daughter to have a clean house. I want my daughter to have a dad that she's proud of, who she can look up to and say like, he did that. What can I do? Yeah. So it's a really amazing level of like, motivation isn't even like the right word.
Purpose.
Purpose. Yes. Purpose. That's a great word. Yep. And that's a word we use a lot here. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it really is. It gives you a whole additional sense of purpose to everything you do. And that's a lot of why we wanted to bring you guys on today, because Emma being your daughter, I know that I get freaked out. Like we went to breakfast this morning and we pulled in and we saw this guy standing by this police car, and he was just like a little awkward acting. You just see some people and they just kind of,
you just get that feeling.
Yeah. And Lauren and I both felt it. We both like went into like hardcore defense mode, and she's like, grab our daughter and just walk in as fast as possible. Yep. And so I did, and we got in, and this guy ended up following us in. And like he even caught the door like behind us, and he was like, oh, thank you. And I mean, he was just the most polite guy ever. Like once we actually like got up to him, but it was just funny how like your threat detection just starts going off the charts. Because you just can't imagine like anything ever happening to her. And that's why we wanted to get this perspective of you guys together, because especially as a parent or any loved one, we wanted to hear from your side, Danielle, as well as your side again, Emma, of like, what is it like to face that as a mother and as a daughter? And how were you guys able to go from where you initially started to now where you are being able to work together on it and, helping to keep each other happy and healthy and safe and move forward together? Mm-hmm. So we know there's a lot of people that are in tricky situations when it comes to mental health challenges. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to pool a lot of those lessons that you guys have learned through this to help people who are battling through this themselves right now. Mm-hmm. So would you guys be able to take us back to not when this first started maybe, but when you first kind of found out about what was going on, Danielle? Whether it was like Emma told you or you kind of found out about it. Take us back to some of those moments where you first found out about this and what's going through your mind at that time.
Looking back, I found out about it on one occasion. She had actually come to me and told me about it. Okay. But it was weeks had gone by since it had actually happened. Since the last time that it happened. So it was one of those things that this is what happened. This is what I did. I haven't done it for a while. I think things are getting better. And I don't remember reacting. There was a lot of other signs and symptoms that I noticed with her, like kind of just retreating to her bedroom a lot more and just kind of like, she was always our one that was with us all the time. So when she started kind of disappearing into her room more and we kind of had to force her to come out to spend time with the family, at the time I was like, oh, she's just a teenage girl, and then not being interested in the things that she was once interested in, she wasn't anymore. And there again, I was like, well, she's growing and changing. It was like all of these things, like in my mind, I feel like I wasn't accepting what was actually happening. And we didn't really talk about it after that. And I still saw her retreating to her bedroom. I still saw all of the other signs, but it was like one of those things where I was like, well, we always had like a great relationship. We try to keep like open communication. There's really not any subject that we don't talk about in our house with our kids. And so I just assumed she would come to me if she needed me and would talk to me about it. And I don't know how long had gone by before it kind of all came to like that breaking point, which was December of 2022. Yeah. And I can't remember what it was. Do you remember?
Like, what do you mean?
How I initially, like, I started checking up on her. Mm-hmm. I'm not really, I don't really check phones. I don't really, and I started checking up on her, and she had gotten in trouble for something and we had taken her phone away. And so then I think her sister told me, well, she can access like her email and like her text or something on her computer. Okay. So I grabbed her computer and checked and found some emails that she had emailed back and forth with her girlfriend at the time, and had told her that she was thinking about it, or you did?
I think that I did.
That she did cut herself. And her girlfriend told her, ask her if she was going to tell me or something. And in the emails, they decided they were going to keep it a secret and they weren't going to tell anybody. And so we ended up sitting her down. We took her computer away. I was like, we've got to fix this. We have to help you. So I started at that point. I wouldn't let her shut her bedroom door because I was like, it all kind of came out. She told me how long it had been going on, when it was happening, which was mostly like at night when she was trying to go to bed. So I was like, you're either going to sleep in bed with me so I can keep an eye on you, or you're not allowed to shut your bedroom door, so that if I have to come back there and just peek in to see if you're okay, that, you know, that's what we're going to do for now. And it was like just like less than a week before Christmas that all of this came out. So, and I said, in the meantime, I'm getting you into therapy. She was not like, she was all for that. She was not somebody that was like, oh, well, I don't want that. She was all for it.
I'm pretty sure one year, it might have been 2021, I put therapy on my Christmas list.
Yeah, she did.
I literally, it was at the top of my Christmas list.
Really?
So I was like, so we started looking. My older daughter had been in therapy for anxiety, I think a year or two before that. And I knew that that one wasn't going to be a good match for Emma. So I asked around. There's so many places in town to contact, but to find a good therapist, you kind of need that word of mouth. You need, and we got the name of a place. So I called, and they were closed until the first of the year. Okay. So I sent them a message online thinking, well, maybe they'll at least check messages. They did, and they told me that to go ahead. They sent me all the forms to fill out, got all the intake stuff. They scheduled it for like the 2nd or 3rd of January to do like an intake. The person that she had like the FaceTime like initial intake with, it was with her and me and Pete. She seemed great. She seemed like somebody that would really help her. So we set her up with, I didn't really want her doing telehealth because I felt like, especially in the beginning, to kind of build that trust up, it would be better in person.
But wasn't I sick, so I had to do my first one over telehealth? My first one was telehealth, I remember that.
Okay. And then after that, you went in person?
I think I was sick.
Okay. But it wasn't the person that she had her intake with. It was
I remember you saying that from last time.
And she went, and I told her, I want to know everything. Like, details tell me everything, but I didn't want to pry. I wanted her to, like, be able to come to me, tell me what, you know, like, what she did in therapy, what she talked about, you know, but I wanted it to be on her terms. And so I didn't ask a lot of questions. It was basically just, how was therapy? And it was good. And that was all I got. So she went to several, and we didn't really notice any changes with her, like, her personality. When all of this started, looking back now, I can see all of the patterns. And when we were in it, I didn't notice it. And it was like a completely different, like a personality flip for her. And I didn't notice any of these changes happening. And I can't remember how many sessions she went to, but finally I was like, Emma, can I ask you a couple questions about therapy? And she's like, yeah. So I was like, well, did you get any homework? And she's like, no. And I said, you've never once gotten a homework assignment? And she's like, no. And I said, okay. And I can't remember the other questions that I asked her, but the answers were no. And I said, okay, have you addressed the self-harm or the anxiety parts? Not really. I'm like, what do you talk about then? So I'm like, now I'm going to start asking questions. And when we sat down and really talked about it, she wasn't getting any help through this therapist at all. And we ended up doing a session together, and that didn't go over well. And that was kind of, but it was good because it kind of showed me this was not the person that was like a good match for her. And we did tell her in the beginning, you know, it's okay. It might take a couple therapists. You might go through a few before you find one that's a good match. But, you know, we didn't really know like what to explain to her on what would make a good therapist, you know. And so we decided that definitely wasn't going to work out. And so we found her another one, which is the one that she's with now. And so I feel like we got very lucky that on our second one, she's amazing. And you've been with her for
a little over a year
now.
Great.
And she started out weekly, and then we moved her to every other week. But we went in and were able to sit down with her first, which we didn't get that opportunity before. So that's definitely something I feel like as a parent, if you're looking for a therapist, you need to find one that's like willing to involve you in your child's care. And so we went in and sat down with her first without Emma, and then she brought Emma in for Emma to have her session. And she was like, if there's any time that you guys want to pop in here at the beginning of her sessions without her just to kind of, check in, we can do that. And then Emma and I had a session together because our relationship really needed work. This really took a toll on our relationship. We were she was always like a mommy's girl. Like, we were very, very close. And when all of this started happening, I think it's one of those things that the person closest to you is the person that you can kind of blame for everything and take your anger out on. And I think that the lack of my understanding and our different communication styles all played a role in there. I think that I've read somewhere that you need to be able to communicate with somebody like in their way of communicating, not in the way you communicate. Yeah. And so it was really, we battled for so long. We battled a lot. I think there was a lot of times that she felt like she hated me. And there was a lot of times where I was like, I love her, but this is not my daughter. Like, she's not very likable. Like, I don't know how to help her. She's not helping herself. Like, I didn't understand the gravity of what she was dealing with, like, on her own, essentially alone, because she wasn't opening up to us. And it's her and Gabby have always had a great relationship, and she didn't go to Gabby. Like, she didn't go to anybody. So I think that me having that relationship with her and then her not coming to me, like, I felt like, what did I do wrong that she can't come to me? And it was just one of those things that, we've had so many conversations since that the shame and embarrassment was a lot of why she wanted help, but then in ways she didn't want help because she didn't want to face that shame and embarrassment. Yeah. And so us going to her therapist together and kind of like battling it out and then crying it out, like, really taught us how to communicate with each other. And it's still a struggle. We're not in a perfect place yet, because she still struggles opening up. I still struggle with not, like, I'm
trying
a fixer. Yes, I'm
a
fixer.
Yeah.
And so it's like we've gotten to a point where it's like, okay, what do you need from me? Do you want me to fix it? Do you want me to just listen? What do you need from me at this point? And that's kind of where we've gotten to, but it took a lot of knocked out drag outs for us to get there. But I don't know. That really gives us a lot of insight, I think. And I was curious, Emma, from your perspective. I know we talked a little bit about it last week on the previous episode, but because Danielle talks about you guys always had a really close relationship most of your time growing up. What was it, or was there anything specific that you noticed you like felt change within you? Like, what was it that made you not want to open up about it initially?
Well, we've talked about it before. Both of us are very emotional people. We both have very, very big emotions. And when you're in a spot like that, big emotions scare you because you're numb. Like we talked about last week, you're numb. So going from 0 to 100, it's terrifying. So like, it wasn't her, it was the emotion and the reaction that I was like a little bit afraid of. And then I've always been a people pleaser too, so like having that fear of disappointment by like the people that like I love the most was like, it kept me from telling anybody. That would make a lot of sense. And I would venture to guess too that since she was the person you were closest to, that would make it then hardest to tell her, because you'd be most afraid of her disapproval or disappointment. And kind of going back to those early days, Danielle, what were some of your like initial thoughts when you're dealing with this because it almost sounds like maybe the first time you found out that, did you think that like, oh, this was kind of a one-time thing or like a phase and it's over now and we'll just move on from this?
I knew that at the time that the friend that she was hanging out with, she did come to me and tell me about her friend, and that her friend did self-harm, and that's kind of where it started. And so she had a falling out with that friend and they didn't really talk anymore. And so I thought, okay, she's come to me and told me that this happened. It's been several weeks since it had happened. She's no longer friends with this person. It'll just, and then when I found out in December 22, I panicked. Like, it was one of those things where it's like, we're supposed to, like, our job is to protect our kids, but I had to figure out how to protect her from herself. And it was just like, I think you go through the blame of, like, why didn't I pay attention to the signs prior to this? Why didn't I kind of, like, dive deeper into what she was going through? Because, I mean, I did see a lot of signs that she was kind of, like, withdrawing from everybody and everything, essentially. Looking back then, she started wearing oversized t-shirts, oversized sweatshirts. Like, it all started making sense to me, but it was like, how did I miss all of this? Like, I was a helicopter parent. Like, I was one of those that I was involved in everything. Like, I was with them all the time. If something was happening in my house, I would know about it, but I had no idea. I don't know if the first time she came to me and told me that did I think it was just a phase? Did I think that, was I kind of in denial? I have no idea. But I know, like, looking back and knowing how long she suffered by herself was awful. But
love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you just go through all of the emotions. You go through the fear, the anger, the blame, the, like, desperation of, like, okay, how do I fix this now? And then having to wait weeks before I could like, the only thing that I could think of to fix it at that time was getting her into therapy, because that's out of my wheelhouse. Like, I don't know, I can kiss boo-boos and I can mend broken hearts, but I can't fix that. But having to wait then several weeks to even get her in anywhere was just, it was terrifying.
Yeah, and I know the therapy piece is something we talked a little bit about off camera last week. I definitely want to dive heavy into it in this conversation, because it's something that I think is a hole in this country we don't do a good enough job at. I do think it's getting better than it ever has been before, and we're moving more and more in a positive direction. But yeah, it's, especially when you're a fixer. And I can empathize with that, because I'm the same way. Like, I'm very, like, outspoken, and, like, I immediately want to fix things. Yeah. And so it's, when that is your default action mode, and you just want to fix things, and you can't. And not only that, but, like, you really can't take a lot of action in any particular direction. That's a really hard spot to be in for somebody who's of that constitution. I'm
also, like, a control freak also.
Oh yeah.
We think it's probably the way that I grew up in the household I grew up in, but, like, if I feel like something is, like, something major, not little things, but it's like something major is out of my control, I do start spiraling, which, thank God for Pete, because he's, like, the calm one that, like, brings me back down. So that fix it person, along with, like, that need of having control, and I couldn't control this situation, and I couldn't fix this situation. So it was one of those things that we just were, like, even though at the end of the day, we both wanted the same things. We want, she wanted to be able to stop and get help, and I wanted her to get help. Like, we were completely on opposite ends of, we needed to figure out how to come together and, like, work together instead of almost battling each other at that point. Yeah,
that makes sense. Emma, I wanted to ask you too, do you think there was any part of, like, back when you're initially talking to your mom about this, before it kind of had this, I don't want to say, like, second wind, but this, like, kind of the resurgence,
the real, like, the big blow up.
Before it fully surfaced, do you think there was any part of you that was maybe kind of holding back a little bit, like, the true gravity of the situation, because you were, like, afraid of that disapproval or that denial, or do you think you were being upfront as possible, but maybe it just wasn't received in the way that you were hoping for?
I think it was a little bit of both, because, like, I would, like, do, like, mention tiny things or, like, say tiny things to, like, try to test the waters, and if it seemed clear, I'd give a little bit more, and then I'd give a little bit more. But if the slight like the slightest hint of something negative, I would retreat immediately like a scared animal, and then I'd start lashing out. So like it'd give a little bit at a time, but never just like really fully up front, because it was like, that's like what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word I'm looking for.
You're all good.
Vulnerable. It's very vulnerable, and like I said, terrifying. So it's like, I'll give you a little bit. Here's a little bit more. Here's another French fry. Like, are you gonna receive it, or are you gonna like give it back to me? So it's like kind of that back and forth, like trying to like decide like if it was safe to do.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense as well. And I'm focusing on this so much because I think this is I think there's several critical points along a journey like this. I think this is one of the most critical, like when you can first open up to a loved one about this, whether it's a parent or a caretaker or a brother, sister, whomever it might be, husband or wife, when you can first open up to a loved one about this, someone that maybe you're even afraid to tell them because you care about them so much and they're what they think of you, that you don't want any sort of disapproval or anything like that. And so I want to get actually both of your thoughts on this question. Looking back, what advice, like Danielle, what advice could you give to a parent who's hearing this from their child? And for you, Emma, like what advice would you give to somebody who's maybe in a spot where they're thinking about telling somebody, but they haven't yet?
I think mostly is sit down with them and ask questions, ask more questions. Definitely don't come at them like aggressively. And like, I think that if I would have sat down and asked her more questions, she would have opened up more, and I would have gotten more of the story. I would have known like, this has happened more than once. This is, this is kind of how I'm feeling. And then you can go from there and figure out, because a lot of times like they will come to you and they're not going to know what they need. They're not going to know like, I need this, I need to go to therapy. I need to be able to learn the tools of, it's kind of taking that addiction of the self-harm and trading it off for something else. But in the meantime, figuring out what you can do in the meantime in those initial moments to stop yourself from doing it. Kids aren't going to know what kind of help they need. So now we've gotten to a point where I'm like, what do you need from me? But if you just sit down and you ask questions, then you can figure out, like, definitely get them into therapy first thing. But also ask more questions when they're in therapy so they don't waste 2 months in therapy opening up and having to tell this same story over and over again. And there again, it's like, looking back, she came to me, told me the one time, and I didn't really show much of a reaction. And now she's in therapy with somebody that's supposed to be helping her, and they're not giving her the help that she needed either. So it's like she did her part by coming to us, and I let her down. The first therapist she went to let her down. So it's like, you just have to ask more questions.
I think that makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah.
And one good thing about questions, and this can extend even beyond just the realms of this conversation, but any difficult subject that you're speaking about, somebody you care about with, questions are very hard to make into an accusatory statement.
Yeah.
So especially if you're somebody who's a fixer,
yeah.
I know this for myself. You hear people talk about challenges or problems or anything like that, and it's immediately just like solution, done. And you think, man, I've given all this great advice. But a lot of times people who are not fixers, they don't really want an answer. They don't really want a solution. They don't want you to come in and fix it. They just need somebody to hear them and to listen to them. And
that is so important too, because there again, with our fix-it mindset, sometimes we're not able to really fully hear what they're saying, because our mind is like, the whole time they're talking, it's like, okay, what can I do to fix this? Instead of really being able to be present and listening to what they're saying and being able to take it in, and then figuring out together, where do you go from here? And
Absolutely.
That was definitely where I failed in that moment for her, that I've learned a lot through a lot of our conversations. And there again, it's just figuring out, like, you know, she's only 17, but she's learned so much about being able to communicate with people and reading people and being able to communicate the way that they kind of need to, like, understand what she's trying to say. And then that's where we struggled the most, was me trying to figure out, like, reading her and figuring out, like, how to communicate back with her.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the most powerful skill you can learn in any relationship with anybody, is how to communicate with the other person you're communicating with. And I really like what you said, Emma, earlier too, about how you're used to feeling nothing, and all of a sudden you've got this big emotion you're faced with, and you're not used to dealing or processing or feeling that kind of emotion, so it's not something you feel comfortable with by any means. And I think that's something else that questions maybe help with, is because when you're talking about it to your mom, I would imagine that part of that process is you getting to feel a little bit of that emotion at a time. And it's kind of like what you were talking about with giving her information. I'd imagine you at the same time, you were able to, like, feel a little bit more, process a little bit more. And I think with the going from a question perspective, again, as non-accusatory as possible, that allows that other person to actually, in a way, work through some of that emotion, work through some of that fear, and be able to start to cross that bridge, so that eventually, once you've processed enough of that emotion, I would imagine you'd be in a spot where you're more ready to take some level of action. So from your perspective, Emma, as somebody who is getting ready to, or contemplating telling a parent or a loved one, what advice would you give them?
Try to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, because situations like that, they are uncomfortable. And then getting into therapy, and there's a stranger in front of you with a notebook writing down everything, and it's like, it's uncomfortable, and it's like, I'm trying to listen, I'm trying to talk to you, like, put down your notebook for a second, but they can't. It's their job. So, like, all of these situations that you're faced with are very uncomfortable, and, like, your life isn't going to be like just like sit back and relax. You have to face those difficult challenges, and when you're in that situation, you're already getting uncomfortable with the uncomfortable a little bit, because it's like you're uncomfortable with yourself. Now you need to learn how to be uncomfortable with others. So really, like, so as she's like big emotions, what I should have done is like try to like sit there and like take, like, not give all of my energy to those emotions, but give a little bit so I could feel a little bit of it. Like, I'm trying to figure out how I'm saying things here, but like, I don't know where to go with that. But
no, I think I get what you're saying. You're kind of talking about allowing yourself to feel more, like, of that emotion.
Be vulnerable and like be uncomfortable. Because that's the only way you're going to get better. Yeah.
And remember, like, this is the person that you were one of the closest people in your life.
Yeah.
So if anybody is going to stand with you on this, it's likely going to be this person or a person like this. And if they really truly love you, they will want to be on your side working toward a solution. And I think what you've both talked about, the biggest trip up for people is that communication piece. Yeah. Because if you, Emma, go to Danielle and tell her, hey, this very serious thing is going on, and Danielle immediately comes in and says, oh, this is what we're going to do to fix it, I could see from your perspective how, like, that's not what you want at all right now. Like, you're still working to come to terms with the situation itself. You haven't even got to the fixing it stage mentally or emotionally. And so I think for both people to be able to kind of step back and just learn more about the situation, and Emma, for you to be able to process the situation a little bit more just by speaking it, and for Danielle to be able to understand it better. I think any way you can help that question and answer stage go for ideally about as long as possible to be able to fully grasp the situation. And then I think at that point, both parties will be more well equipped to take that action towards, you know, whatever solution may be available at the time. So going into therapy, I know we talked a little bit about this already, and it does sound like you guys were matched up with not a great therapist at first. And I've been there myself. I've actually not done therapy a lot in my life. There's definitely been a lot of points where I needed it very badly. And again, just like coming from where I came from, it was nothing I ever even considered. They even had like free counseling and therapy at school. And I think looking back, there were a couple times I actually thought about going, which was like a big thing for me. But I didn't end up going because I remember this now. I never ended up even trying to go because I was like, there is no way anybody is going to remotely understand what happened to me. And of course, that's not true. There are people out there who know some of what I've gone through. And not only that, I think the person doesn't have to understand what you went through in order to help you. I think that's such an important piece because that was the piece that kept me from going to therapy. And I don't know, looking back, what the difference may have been, but it could have given me, you know, like productive years of my life back had I gone that route. And I didn't, and you know, fortunately everything's turned out okay, but I would advise the people, never let that thought hold you back because they're probably, nobody is ever going to understand your specific situation fully because we're all different people with unique circumstances in life and unique ways that we process and experience them. So nobody is ever going to 100% understand your perspective. Yeah, it helps if they're familiar with that challenge. And I think most good therapists will at least be familiar with different challenges that people face, whether it's anxiety, depression, PTSD, things like that. You know, it's just like a surgeon. Like the guy who amputated my leg, he has no idea what it's like to have an amputation. He has all 4 limbs, but he's very familiar with amputation and he knows how to do it in a way that is promoting of the most activity with the least amount of pain and all these different things. He knows things that I could never dream of, even though he's never experienced it himself. So I like to think of it a little bit like that, and that even though they may not understand or be able to fully grasp the gravity of your situation, they can still have the knowledge and the tools to help you battle it in your own life. And that was one of the biggest pieces I missed, is I thought, oh, if I go to therapy, it's going to be this person trying to fix me who doesn't have any idea what I went through. And really that's not the case. Nobody else ever, and I don't even necessarily love the word fix a person necessarily, but I definitely get what we were talking about earlier, but it's not that anybody ever like fixes the problem for you. You have to fix it yourself. I'm a big believer in that. They just equip you with the tools, the mindset, and the confidence to be able to do so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to somebody? Because you've already said that finding the right therapist, or a therapist who's good at working with.
And it's okay to like go through as many as you have to. Like if you are not feeling like that sense of trust, I'm pretty good at reading people, so I feel like it wouldn't take me as long. But if we're talking about teenagers, a lot of them aren't necessarily in tune to understanding, like, everybody's going to make them feel uncomfortable. You know, they're not, that's not going to be something that they're going to easily open up about. So it's probably going to take a while for them to figure out if it's a good fit, which there again, I definitely would encourage talking to your kids and then kids talking to their parents. You don't even have to go into detail about what you discussed in therapy, but that way you can kind of help them be like, I don't think that this is necessarily a good fit for you. So you might go through 10 different therapists before you find one that you're like, this is a good person. Like, this is somebody that I'm going to be able to open up with. I feel like they can help me. You know, you have to be able to build up that level of trust with them where you're comfortable enough to open up to them. And I think that that's another thing, is there's still such a stigma attached to going to therapy in general. And I've always said, I think everybody, I don't care how you grew up, I don't care where you are at in your life now, everybody could benefit from therapy. Like, life is just hard sometimes, and it's nice to have somebody that you can talk to. And so I think that makes it a little bit easier. I know that there's a lot of situations where there's a lot of parents that aren't open to therapy, so it's not necessarily going to be as easy for their kids to come to them and be like, I need to go to therapy. And we were never like against therapy. We've always, both of us have been huge advocates for it. But even when she came to us and was like, you know what, maybe therapy would be like a good idea for us, at that initial time, we didn't jump at getting her into a therapist. So I can only imagine how somebody that's not necessarily comfortable with going to therapy, kind of what their mindset would be. But there are good ones out there. You just kind of have to weed through the ones that aren't so good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think sometimes there's just different, like you said, like you guys communicate differently.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes therapists have different approaches. I know it's been a few years ago now. I actually tried to get into therapy, and I was looking locally, and everybody was 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out. And I was like, I just remember at the time I was feeling like, I need help right now. Like, I can't wait 6 weeks. I can't wait 8 weeks. Like, I need help right now. And so I was kind of lost for a second. I didn't know what to do. I ended up signing up for one of these online, I think it was Cerebral it was called. Well, just one of these online services that keeps popping up. And the lady was super nice I worked with, but, you know, and they take the personality quiz and everything to try to match you up with the right person. But it did not work at all for me, because it was, I only saw her like 3 or 4 times. And it was like the first time, explain the whole situation of everything, you know, good call. We'll see you next week. Okay, next week rolls around, and then explain the updated situation with everything. And she's like, okay, we'll see you next week. And so I kind of caught on. I was like, this lady's just like here to listen to me.
Yeah.
And I need like action. I need something to do. I need some way to make this better. You know, it was like $45 a week or something. I was like, man, I can't keep paying this. So I only saw her like 3 or 4 times I was done. And I think for a long time I thought like, oh, that's just a bad service. Like, they don't actually care. It doesn't actually work. But maybe it wasn't that situation. Maybe it was just like, maybe she's a person who listens to people.
Yeah.
And there are people who need that. As hard as it is for me and you, people like me and you, Danielle, to understand, there's people who need that. They just need to be heard. They just need to be able to process and experience and feel the situation, because that's something they don't feel comfortable doing by themselves. So I think it wasn't not a good match for me. But like you say, there's somebody out there who will be a good match for you, who can work with you. And probably realistically there's a lot of people out there who could work with anyone. And so it's just that process of trying to find the right person. But I think you bring up a great point, that don't be afraid. Like, your health and your mental health is the most important thing you have. Like, don't be afraid to fight for yourself and be an advocate for yourself.
You have to, because nobody's going to be a bigger advocate for yourself than you are.
Absolutely.
So you have to.
Yeah, and if you don't speak up about a situation, they're not going to do it for you. Like, if you don't feel comfortable with somebody, and not even that, but if you don't feel like somebody is not a good fit for you, you're not getting any level of benefit from it, even after just the first couple of sessions. I feel like after, I think after the first session, but definitely the first
I'm
two,
the same way,
like, you should have some level of benefit. You should be able to walk out of there feeling like you were in a better situation to tackle the next week than you were before. Even if they didn't give you tools to fix it, even if you're a person who just needs to be heard, at least you feel like you've been able to process some of what's going on.
Yeah, not every session's going to be where you're going to walk out of there and feel lighter, but if you are just, you walk out of there feel like the same as you walked in, like, that's just not going to be a good fit for you.
No, because you're clearly not moving forward at that point. And it is a very expensive thing, and it's a very intense personal thing. So you don't want to waste any time with it necessarily. You want to be able to have benefit right up front. And I think that's one of the best signs of a good therapist is, do you feel a strong benefit from the very beginning, and do you feel really confident in this person and their ability to help you with whatever you need?
We sat down with her therapist now when we went to that first session, and I think we were only in there 10-15 minutes with her, and we walked out, like, I knew within 5 minutes of sitting down with her, but after we walked out, I turned to Pete and I was like, I love her. Like, I think she's really going to help Emma, and I think Emma is going to adore her. Like, their personalities are going to be fantastic together. And so I couldn't wait for Emma to get through that session so I could
Yeah.
find out. And as soon as she got done, I was like, well, what'd you think? And she's like, oh my God, I love her. And I'm like, oh my gosh, me too. So it was just, I knew within 5 minutes that she would be a great fit for Emma. And like we had told you off camera, the last one that she had, I think you were like 6 or 8 sessions in.
I think it was around 6. It was more on the shorter side.
That I met the other one, and I walked in there, and within 5 to 10 minutes, I was like, this is just like, how is Emma sitting here?
Yeah.
How has Emma spent 5 to 6 hours with this person? And like, it was
something.
Yes, it was interesting.
No, like, I had tried to open up to her about something small, testing waters. And she was like, yeah, you shouldn't think that way. And I'm like, well, can you help me not think that way? And she's like, I don't know. Go ahead.
My gosh.
And I'm like, all right, come on, Mom. Come help.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's just like not helpful at all. Like
No,
that's
like,
the whole reason you're there is like I
if-
don't want to have these thought patterns.
So help me change my way of thinking. Yeah.
If it were that easy, then mental health would just not be a thing.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh
like
my
my
gosh.
therapist now, like one of like my first sessions with her, she's like, we need to work on rewiring your brain. And I'm like, yes. Like,
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that is such a beneficial skill that can be taken beyond just this situation and applied to anything.
Yeah.
One thing we've really been fixating on recently is just that constant like background message you have in your brain about everything you're doing. And I think even just that message can really affect your disposition or your approach to every day in your life. And just like, you're going through the house doing little things, and even as small as like, say you like go to throw something in the trash and the trash can's full. Like, do you immediately let yourself get annoyed and you just try to shove it down
Yes,
further?
yes,
Or
you do.
yeah, that's exactly how you're supposed to deal with it.
That's always been my go-to too, and it's been recently I've been like really forcing myself to like, no, I'm just gonna take the trash out.
Yeah.
And put a new bag in.
You're
it
like,
takes
it's such
30
a
seconds.
simple, small thing.
It's
Yeah.
also so much work.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's just you get so busy that you see these little tiny things as so much bigger than they are. And then you actually do it, and as soon as you do it every time, you're like, oh, that didn't take any time at all. And you go about your day and it's fine.
I can breathe now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I think the key difference there is like, what is the message that pops in your brain when you encounter that scenario? Is it you're irritated and annoyed that the trash can's full? Is it that you're like, oh, I don't have time for this? Or can you train yourself to get to a point of like, here's an opportunity for me to do something for myself, or here's an opportunity for me to do something to help my family.
Yeah.
That's what I've like worked to rewire my brain to say now. And it sounds ridiculous to say that about taking the trash out, but it becomes very powerful when you compound that and make
it
that your
transfers
default.
over to everything else then
Yeah.
when you get in a routine of just doing it with the smaller
Because,
things
I
like
mean,
that.
Even with like depression, like you hear all the time, like you can't shower, you can't brush your teeth, because even the most mundane task in taking care of yourself like feels impossible, and like you can't. So like even something as small as taking out the trash, like that is a big step. Even if it to the outside eye it seems like that it's taking out the trash, but it also is like it's taking out the trash. Like you're doing it.
Yeah. And you're building, every time you do that, you build yourself into somebody who is more capable of doing that.
Yes.
Yep.
And that will compound very quickly over time. And that all starts with rewiring your brain and rewiring your messaging pattern and your beliefs about yourself.
Yeah.
We go into the gym all the time, and you'll hear it all the time. People will say, and it's an easy thing to fall into, but people will say like, I don't know why I'm not getting stronger, or I'm having an off day today, I'm not feeling it, all of these things. And for whatever reason, like whenever I hear somebody say that, it just like, my brain just like alarms go off and stuff. Because I think it's just, we've been in this for so long now that I am just so focused on this like internal messaging, and I never really say anything about it except to Paul. I get on Paul all the time. But it's I think it's just one of those things though. It's like yeah, you may be feeling that day. Like, it may be a day where every weight feels just so much heavier than it should. You're not feeling good. You're not, XYZ, whatever. But I think about, like, what are you gaining by verbalizing that? Yeah. What are you gaining from allowing yourself to think that?
Yeah.
And really, you're not, like, if you allow yourself to believe that about yourself for that day, you're going to have a not good workout.
Yeah, it's going to be horrible.
It's going to happen. You are going to speak that into existence 100% of the time. So then I think, well, what if you flip that? And what if you're like really not feeling good? Everything feels really heavy, but you just say like, man, I'm feeling really strong today, or like, I'm going to have a great workout today, or like, I'm, in a perfect spot for this, right? Like, if you just say that and like force yourself to think that a few times, it may not totally turn the workout around and make you all of a sudden perform at your best, but it's going to make you perform better than you would have otherwise if you go down that other path. So that's just something we've been focusing on a lot. But I think, like you say, Emma, that could be a very useful strategy in starting to combat mental health as well, and starting to work toward, overcoming those challenges. Is that like one of the main skills your therapist has given you to like work with, or are there other strategies that she's worked with you on?
There's so many. Like, I have homework every single time I go see her.
There's that homework from the therapist.
Exactly. And sometimes, like, it's as simple. Like, there was one time, like, I had not gotten breakfast that morning, and she said, your homework is go home and go eat. And I was like, but I'm poor right now. And she's like, I don't care. You're going to spend that last $10 in your bank account right now to go eat. But then there was also, like, another time. It was actually my first piece of homework I ever got for her. And I've really struggled with negative self-talk. That is one thing that I've really struggled with, and I still do. And she was like, well, would you say that about your best friend? And I was like, no, that's my best friend. Like, that's a goddess. I would never say that about my best friend. And she's like, well, if you go to say, I hate myself, say, I hate my best friend instead. You, like, rewire your brain, and if you want to say it about your best friend, you're not allowed to say it about yourself. Yeah. So, like, there's so many different, like, tiny specific tools that, like, she's given me, and they've worked. And some of them have worked, some of them haven't. Like, there's been, like, a few, like, anxiety calming down stuff that she's given me. Like, there was one, it was like, every time you, like, if you're having trouble breathing, like, trace your hand. If you go up, like, breathe. Once you get to your fingertip, hold it, and when you go down, breathe out. Tried that, and it made it 100 times worse because I kept getting off rhythm, and then I was like, I kept getting off.
I was like, that's a lot.
And then you get frustrated, and then you get more anxious.
And then I was like, oh my god, I hate myself. Like, I can't even breathe right. Like, so, but you keep going through, and you keep, like, finding more tools that do work, because it's tools and therapists are, like, the same. Like, you got to find the ones that work and got to find the ones that don't work. So, but, like, just, like, those tiny specific tools for me have helped way more than, like, the overall ones, because sometimes the tiny specific things, like, get to you more than the big overall picture does.
Yeah, I agree. It's that same idea of just making your world small.
Yeah.
So when brushing your teeth seems like a huge monumental task, what's something even smaller than that, like breathing, that you can actually do and actually focus on? Can you find the smallest task possible to focus on right now, so that then you can do that, gain a little bit of confidence, find something just a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and it can kind of snowball from there. And I think there can actually be a lot of emphasis placed on these small background, not just actions, but thoughts, words, beliefs, emotions. I think we undervalue those way too much. Maybe it's because we live in a society where, like, everything is big. It seems like, not just, like, physically speaking with, like, our food and our drinks and that kind of stuff, but just, like, every day, it feels like there's such...
Everything is forced to be a big deal. Everything has to be a big deal, or else it doesn't matter.
And I think also that forced, or that instant gratification. So if you're dealing with a problem, you go to therapy, and you want, in that first session, you want that big thing that's going to make it better. And instead, what you don't realize is, over time, I've always told the girls when they were, when Gabby was in therapy, and then when Emma started, that you're building your toolbox.
Yeah.
Like, to get all of the skills and tools that you need to help you through any situation, whether it's a high anxiety situation, whether you're just struggling to even get out of bed that day, you're getting up and you're not feeling your best, so that negative self-talk is like really prominent. Like, you're building that toolbox to like figure out which one you need to pull out on that day. And I think that that's going back to that, the small little things, those are going to fix your problems in the long run versus something like big and like instant.
Yeah, and I think that is another big thing to focus on, because that we keep getting further and further and further in that direction, especially with cell phones and social media and everything, which, you know, I'm a big proponent of all that. I think it can help move our world and our society forward and be used as a very positive thing, but it can also, like all things, be used as a very negative thing too. And one of those pieces is that instant gratification. Is I think we are struggling now to get ourselves to have a longer attention span, even when it's necessary. And, you know, I even remember back to 5, 6, 7 years ago when I was first getting into training, and I was watching all these YouTubers all the time, you know, and like every day you couldn't wait for like the next vlog or whatever to come on, you know, and it was always like 15, 20, you got so excited when it was like a 30-minute vlog or something. And then now we can't even sit through those. You know, it's like we watch a 90-second reel, and like I'll even find myself, I'm like, come on, just get to the point
90
already.
seconds
like,
is a long
45
time.
seconds.
Yes. I'm like 30 seconds and then I'm done.
Yeah, that's what we've started cutting all of our content to 30 to 60 seconds for the podcast, you know, for shorts, and then a lot of our training shorts and stuff's even shorter because you know, it performs better when it's shorter, because it's just people don't want to wait for it. You know, there's an infinite amount of content and gratification out there. How do you get your whole point and your whole message and everything you want to convey across in as short amount of time as possible? But I think, again, that's just something that a skill that has to be trained and something that has to be learned. And a tool you can develop. You know, find your medium for longer form content or longer form delayed gratification. You're like, I think podcasts are a great platform. That's one that's always worked for me. Like audiobooks has always worked great for me, whether that's like longer YouTube videos for somebody or books or albums, whatever it may be. Just some of that longer form, I think, is always good to incorporate in your life in various ways. I wanted to ask you, Emma, looking back on like your journey to finding a therapist, what, from your perspective as a teenager, high schooler battling with mental health, what advice would you give to somebody who's never gone to therapy before but is maybe interested in it? What would you give them as advice for trying to find a good therapist for them?
Finding a good therapist, I put all that on my mom. Because like in my first session, like I didn't know it was a good therapist, and like I didn't know like that therapy kind of had a little bit of a timeline. Like by the second session you should be talking about your problems. I was like in session 6 and I'm like, we're still getting to know each other. So I didn't know until she started asking questions that like, this isn't normal for therapy. I was like, okay, I guess it's normal for her to be talking about her personal life and telling me, spending a whole session talking about herself. I guess it's normal for me to talk about my current hyperfixation. Like, I'm not comfortable with her yet. Like, I'm not going to talk to her about my issues, but a good therapist will force you to immediately talk about those issues, because your hyperfixation in her personal life is not going to help you. So you need first rule her out is if they aren't almost immediately diving into your issues, then I'd cross it out. Find somebody who has your like listening / communicating style, because I kind of, in my brain, I pair it into 3. There's the listener, the solver, and then there's the mix, which is what I need and which is what my therapist is. I need someone to listen to me, and then we find solutions. So like most of my sessions is about 30 to 45 minutes of me just like ranting, getting it all out there, her throwing in a joke here and there, and then those last couple minutes is like, here's your homework, here's what we're gonna do to fix it. And that has worked so well for me. So find someone with that same style as you, and I think those two things combined, like along with like like figuring out like personality things, because personalities can clash, like just like small things too, but those are the big things that I like really push, I think, to finding a good therapist.
Yeah. No, I love all of that. And I actually really love the very first thing you said, where you said, like, my mom handles that.
Yeah.
Because I actually think that's a really great piece of advice, is for anybody who's battling with mental health challenges, again, recognize that you are not alone here. Like, you have people in your life who can help you with this and who want to help you with this. And I think by not only you kind of giving that to your mom and like trusting her in that puts you in a position where you now kind of by default have to open up to her a little bit more, put a little more trust in her. And as if Danielle being a fixer, that gives you something to do.
Yes, because there's been so many times that she'll come to me and be like, we'll sit down and I'll be like, well, why didn't you tell me this, or why didn't you tell me that? Well, you were going through this, or you were going, and I'm like, what you don't understand is, as a parent, we could have the entire weight of the world on our shoulders, but the minute our kids come to us, we want to take on your problems. I will drop that world off to the side, and because I want to fix their problems. I want to be able to take some of that burden off of them. And it doesn't matter what else we're dealing with. Nothing is more important than our kids and what our kids need. So for them to come to us and like, especially me being a fixer, and like open up and be like, Mom, can you do this? I'll be like, I'm there. It's done. Yeah.
And also like me saying like, let mom deal with that. That's also the win-win, because you get one less thing off your plate. So you can just be like, okay, I know it's going on behind scenes, but I don't have to worry about it. I just got to put it in my calendar and show up and then do the work. That's all I have to do. So it takes one less thing off of you, and then it does force you to open up like the people around you. So like there's like almost, I don't see any negatives in just being like, okay, here you go, Mom.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And I think that by doing that, like you said, when you're in a position where everything in your life, including your own hygiene, feels like a massive endeavor, finding a good therapist is a really big thing. So if you're somebody who's contemplating therapy and you want to open up to somebody, find somebody in your life who likes to take action, who cares about you, wants the best for you, and likes to do things, because the person you may go to first may not be a fixer themselves, and they may not be ready to just tackle this challenge of finding a good therapist right off the bat. As Danielle said, in pretty much every case, if you're going to a parent who loves you and cares about you, they're going, no matter what their disposition is, who they are, they're going to work as hard as they can to find something beneficial for you. But that may not be a parent you're going to, it may be somebody else. You may not be going to a fixer right away, but find somebody in your life who you know has that kind of disposition and really likes to have something to do, something they feel like they can do to help you or help the situation, and give that to them. It helps you, and it really helps them to have something to do, to feel like they have some level of power, control over the situation. I think that is just such a huge piece. Not only that, but by giving that to somebody else, especially somebody who's extremely close to you in that manner, I think in a way you're actually going to have better luck at finding a good therapist for you. Because I think your mom knows you well enough to know what you need, as far as like somebody who she thinks you'll get along with, your personalities will mesh, things like that. But not only that, but I think she'll be she probably was more willing to fight for you in that, back at that time period, in that situation, than maybe you would have been for yourself. And to talk about like the therapy side of things, you bring up a really good point that if you've never been in therapy, like we don't do a good job in this country of educating people on therapy. Like until you've been in it, and even once you've been in it, you still don't even necessarily know what it's supposed to be like. And we've talked
different for everyone.
Oh yeah, and we've talked about how everybody needs something different. Everybody, as you said, is going to have a different experience. But for somebody who's never been to therapy at all, like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline for what you would recommend? Like what would you say is a good baseline what you should feel like coming out of a therapy session?
Hopeful, because coming out of the first one with like my first therapist, like I did feel a little hopeful, but I was like, but it was more about like maybe this will get better, like she will get better, like maybe like it's just like first time, it's kind of weird, like new person. Second therapist, when I went, my current one, when I walked out of there, I was smiling. I was like, I cannot wait for my next session. I cannot wait to walk into this building again. So like I was genuinely super excited to like start working with her, because I knew that like she was going to not immediately help me, but she was going to dive into those issues and she was going to help me. The first one was like, I think she's going to help me, but like it was like that gut feeling, like I knew.
But in that moment, she did immediately help you.
She did.
Yeah.
Because she gave you that sense of hope that, you know, some things were going to change. And I think that's another thing, too, is, you know, you know you're in a good session or you've got a good therapist when, like, you've talked for your hour that you're in there 50 minutes. And the time is up and you're like, oh. Yeah. You kind of don't want to leave because you feel like you've just started diving in. That's when you know that you found a good match.
Yeah, time starts moving very quick.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love that you used the word hope there, because it doesn't imply that like they made the situation better, like they fixed the situation 100% in one session, but it does mean that they've given you confidence that they will equip you with the tools to be able to fix the situation or fight the challenge. And I think that is such an important feeling. And when you can get that feeling, just the confidence that this will get better, like that is just like that. I think that feeling is more important than the feeling of like, oh, I actually overcame this. Yeah. And it just ties back.
That's what you needed the most in that moment.
Exactly. In a world where you think there's no escape, you see no light, really, you're not fearing some negative outcome. You're fearing that there's no hope of a positive outcome. Like, that's the true fear. And so when you get that hope, really that ends up becoming a big part of the solution, of having that confidence that, oh, I can fight this, I can get better, I can work through this challenge. And that in so much of the case is everything, and it ties back to that process of it being the process of the fight and the process of the challenge, the being impossible so much more than the doing the impossible. And so I think that's a theme we just see recurrently all the time. So going to kind of how things have progressed to more like present day times, what are some things or some changes or some strategies that you guys have been able to use in your own lives to be able to start working together more as a unified front and being able to, you know, communicate with each other's different styles? And how have you worked to kind of mend and build back that relationship that you had before?
I think for me, like, really coming to her and telling her exactly, like, don't fix it, listen. You can fix it after, but right now, listen. So telling her exactly what I need, like, which that's kind of like me telling her don't fix it is kind of being like okay, this is your time to shush. My time. I have the talking ball. You'll get the talking ball after me. So, like, just going and being open and saying, this is exactly what I need from you. And then her also expressing afterwards, like, this is what I need from you. Like, and it's not even like, I need you to listen to me now. It's like, I need you to let me, like, kind of help you with this. Not fix it, but just even kind of help. Or even saying, and what she does is saying, what can I do to now help? And then I'll be like, sometimes I'm like, I have no clue, just be here. And other times I'll be like, well, maybe, like, you can do this. So, like, just keeping that communication very, very open and being very clear. And something I've also learned is coming with a neutral tone, because sometimes when you're emotional, like, it's very easy to get misconstrued. So, like, I've learned, talk a little slower, like, keep your voice, like, very, like, steady and neutral, like, try not to let your emotions get the best of you, and then just keep very, like, neutral words, like, and just keep that the entire time, because then that way it's like almost impossible for anything to like get mixed around and anybody to get upset.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to like the question, find just as non-confrontational or accusing like tone or strategy or whatever you can do. I like that thought a lot of, from your side, you say, hey, this is exactly what I need right now. And from Danielle's side, kind of like what we talked about earlier, you can say, what do you need from me? And hopefully by both of you kind of focusing on that, you'll be able to make sure that part of the conversation is met at least, because it's, you know, it all comes back to communication, but it just starts with communication of how does this person communicate and what do they need from this conversation. Like you basically have to set up rules for the conversation
you really
before
do.
it can even happen. So are there any tools that the therapist has, because I know you guys have done some sessions together now, like what tools has the therapist given you guys to work on like together with all of this?
Mostly, I think, kind of what she had just said with, you know, her coming to me, like, we've kind of got this, like, we kind of had this nonverbal agreement, I think, just this understanding that we have a certain level of trust that I'm not going to pry, but in that same respect, like, you have to be able to come to me and, like, let me in, if, you know, so that we can work on things together. Like, we've always tried to tell them, no matter what they come to us with, no matter how we react, we always, like, number one, we love them. Nothing will ever change that. I might get a little emotional, and I always tell her when we're sitting there talking, I'm going to tell her, I'm going to cry. This has no reflection on how our conversation's going to go, but I'm probably going to cry, and that does happen a lot. I mean, the one thing to get me emotional is my kids. Like, that's the one thing where I will always get emotional. But I think just like what she said too, coming together in that neutral tone, like it's hard as a parent to kind of keep like that, just like that neutral, even tone where you're just not overreacting. You're trying to stay calm. You're like counting to 100 in your head. But it's done wonders for us. I mean, that therapy session, I mean, going into it, I was like, I'm going to be in so much trouble. This is all my fault. Like, I'm just going to get torn apart by this therapist. Like, and that's kind of what happened, like, during her first therapist. Yeah. It was just, like, awful. And so we go in with her one now, and it was nothing at all like I thought it was going to be. It was just us. I mean, it was kind of like she had us facing each other, like she wasn't even in the room. She kind of gave, like, Emma the floor first, then she gave me the floor, and, like, really kind of, like, let us talk to each other, but then refereed if she needed to kind of, like, change the way that maybe we're wording things, or just, and it's, there again, it's just about respecting the other person and understanding that they're not going to communicate the same way that you're communicating, and they're not going to understand the point you're trying to get across if you're kind of coming at them with, like, all the emotion. And
that makes a lot of sense, because it's like she's a moderator for the conversation, nothing more, and that her skill is being able to interpret how each of you communicate, which probably somebody who's a third-party detached person, even if they don't have any training, it's probably pretty easy for somebody outside of it to see, like, oh, this person needs more of this person needs more of this. And then when you have specialized training in it, you really can take it to another level to be able to do that. And she was
able to, like, take what I was saying and kind of explain it to Emma in a way that Emma would kind of, like, because I can say one thing to her and it not really sink in, or she's going to take it a different way. Then she goes to her therapist, and her therapist could say word for word what I said to her, and it just sinks in, and she's like, oh, I get it now. And that's kind of what she did in that moment for us, is she kind of took what I said and kind of, like, talked to Emma about it, and then talked to me about what Emma was saying to me, so that we could kind of get on the same page of understanding where each other was going with it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's a really good tool to be able to have if you're having those troubles with communication. You know, have a person there that can basically facilitate it and, you know, help each person give what the other person needs. I think that's absolutely huge. So moving kind of beyond the therapy piece, and even like to where you guys are today. I know now you've got a very close relationship, and you guys go to the gym together, you train together, you do a lot of really awesome things together. And I promised Emma we'd talk about Taylor Swift a little bit. So Danielle, were you the person that first introduced her to Taylor Swift before she was even born?
Before
right?
she was even born.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm a Swiftie from day one. Yes.
That's a pretty big thing to be able to say, because I feel like a lot of her fan base is much younger and maybe wasn't even born yet sometimes when she first came around. So what has like her music, and we talked with Emma about it last time, what is her music and her message and just who she is, her brand, what has that meant to you throughout everything you've been through in life?
think that, I mean, I just love music in general, and I think that with her music in particular, it doesn't matter what you're going through. You can relate what one person feels from one song. Somebody else is going to take away a different message from that same exact song. They can relate it to their life in some way. You know, a good example is like she talked about last week. It was so hard for me to like sit here last week in the corner and like not speak up and say anything. But when she was talking about Who's Afraid of Little Ol' Me, is being like her favorite song on the new album, and how she kind of looks at it is like, you know, kind of how she's kind of been with like her friend group and things like that, and how like she hasn't felt like she's been the kindest at times, and so it's like they're afraid of me. I look at it as like, you're underestimating me, you know, like so it's so funny. We both love that song for different reasons, but it's like listening to those lyrics, it's like I take away from it is like, you should be, because you're underestimating me. You don't know what I'm capable of, you know, like, and so I love that you are able to do that with like any, and it's really hard because we're just now kind of making Pete into a Swiftie. Like this latest album, he went to the concert with us, and I was like, how can you go to a 3.5 hour concert and not sing to one song? Like, we know you know the lyrics. We play this, I'm pretty sure we played it all the way up to Pittsburgh. Like,
he's
like, he
listened
knows
to so much.
He knows lyrics, and he just did not sing along. And so when the latest album came out, he finally got it. He finally got what we've been saying for all of these years. But he's finally getting to the point where he's like actually listening to the words, because he loves music, but not necessarily in the same ways we do. We love it because if we find a song, we're like, oh my gosh, like I feel this song, like these words, I can like relate to those. And he just kind of like tones it out.
Almost like he's in it more for the sound that it gives, while we're in it for the lyrics, meaning and the lyrics
and the story behind it. So I'll listen to a song and be like, oh my gosh, I love this song, you got to listen to the words. And then I'll be like, did you listen to the words? So it's like, it's just, I can relate so much to like so many of her songs. And there's like 2 of them that she has come out with that I can't even listen to because they make me cry, because like it like switched. The one was like kind of reminded me of like different parts of my childhood, and then as the girls have gotten older, now I'm like, I can't listen to them because this is about my kids and it's gonna make me cry. And it's the Never Grow Up, and what is the other one?
There's a couple of them, because Ronan always makes me cry, because that's about the little boy Ronan is, and then Bigger Than the Whole Sky was another one that was really sad.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the ones about you kids. And it was
The Best Day.
The Best Day, yes. Those ones I cannot listen to because I was like, they came on, like I remember them coming on so frequently because I just have like a Taylor Swift playlist that is not the Spotify one, because I had to make my own. And it just shuffles through all of her songs. And it was like when we were moving Gabby up to Morgantown, like her first year to her dorms, and Never Grow Up came on, and I'm like, I cannot listen to this. Like, I cannot. I will break down. I will not leave her in Morgantown. So it just, there's so many that can just relate to your life. And like you said last week, there's a song for everything.
Exactly. And also, like, not just her music, but like what she stands for. Because I didn't really talk about that much last week. Like, she is a full throttle feminist, like, stands for like love and freedom for everybody. Like, everybody deserves the same rights. Like, she, like, everyone talks about her carbon emissions, but they're not looking at, she has, I think it was in like the UK, she has donated enough to the food banks to feed like over 1,000, like thousands of people for over a year. Like, and she's done that in every single city that she's traveled to. She's boosted so many economies. Like, she has done so much incredible things for our world other than giving us amazing music. And people don't look at that. They're like, oh my God, she's so basic. All of her like songs sound the same. She's just another blonde hair like pop star. I make her listen to my Kanye, and I'm like, stay away from me.
Yeah, people will always find something. There's people who look for negative by default.
Yes.
And so they will always find something negative about anybody on the planet. And, I'll say it, I feel sorry for those people.
Yeah.
Because if you're a person who's in that, not that you're a bad person, but that is a terrible mindset to have. And I feel bad for those people because generally that comes from a place of extreme personal insecurity.
Yes.
And, we wish everybody who's facing that the best and working through that. And I think messages like you guys bring on here is a perfect place to start. But I really think you're right, Emma, that she is somebody that, because I've been studying her a lot recently and just her journey to here, because like we talked about last time, I will study anybody who is incredible at building brand.
Yeah.
That's something we're so focused on. So I study her a lot. I study Dwayne The Rock Johnson a lot.
Yes.
All these kind of people that have built this massive brand, but not only that, they're like extremely good people too.
Yes.
Gary Vee would be another one. And so I read a lot about her and like things she's done, things like that. Yeah. She really does go far and beyond what anybody at her level would be required to do. Yeah. And you can tell she's got a lot of conscious thought toward how what she's doing is affecting not only the people that work for her and with her, but every single one of her fans too. Yeah. I've seen her concert on the Disney Plus thing, but I was not at one of her concerts. But you can just see how she's designed so much of that concert to be like an experience for the fans.
Yeah, it absolutely. It's very
more
interactive.
Than like anybody else ever would. Yep. So I think that's really cool. But one thing that really struck me is I saw this kind of like statistical analysis of like her net worth and how she spends her money and things like that. And I don't know that it's like third party verified, so it may not be 100% accurate. Regardless, it talked about her being valuated. Currently, she's valuated at like $1.3 billion, which incredible achievement, like unbelievable achievement. Like, when you make that kind of money, you can do a lot of good with that kind of money, as you talked about. And it broke it down to where basically they said that she could take that valuation and pull out basically, if she never made a dime for the rest of her life, she could divide that up evenly and live off $52 million a year for like the next 40 years or something like that, and get her to 70 something years old, which is like the average US age limit, whatever. So basically they said she could live off $52 million a year for the rest of her life.
Yep.
And then they talked about how that if you equivalated $52 million to the average U.S. income, which is like $60,000 $60,000, like they basically showed comparisons of what it's like for her to spend money versus us to spend money. And they started out with showing like a new iPhone would cost, for her, that's like us spending like 28 cents or something like that.
Yeah.
Things we wouldn't even think twice about. So they started out with that, but then they broke it down to some of the stuff she's been doing, like the truck driver bonus she gave over Christmas. That was like the equivalent of her spending like $20,000.
Yeah.
And you start reading that stuff and it's like, okay, who here is writing a $20,000 check just to improve the lives of somebody around them?
Yeah.
And then they broke it down to like the bonuses she gave to all her dancers and workers and stuff. That was the equivalent of somebody who makes $60,000 a year spending $60,000.
Yeah.
I was like, who gives up their entire salary for a year?
Yep.
Or what could be her entire salary for a year just to improve the lives of the people who work for her.
Yep.
She had no obligation, no requirement, nothing to do that whatsoever.
Yeah.
But she did that to build their lives up.
Yep.
And she, and it's, I mean, not only is it good to like for helping them and helping people and shows how much she cares about them, but she can know in return that by making that investment in the people around her, that it's just going to help all of them go even higher to the next level.
Yep.
And I think that that's just such a great perspective on what she does. So people can try to tear her down or like laugh at her or whatever as much as they want, but I just always go back to that. I was like, who writes a $20,000 check for somebody else?
Well, that's what we always said. Somebody's always going to find something to like nitpick, or she's laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah.
So, and her fans are just going to always be with her. Yeah. She's not going to have a problem. It doesn't matter if a million people hate her, because there's 50 million out there that love her. So it just is. I don't know. We love her.
Yeah. I mean, I got her name written on my upper thigh, so I don't think she's getting rid of me.
That's awesome. So has she had any like particular songs, whether they're newer songs or older songs, that have really helped you guys to communicate? Because I know that music can be a very powerful tool of communication, and really like some nonverbal communication, because like you said, Danielle, everybody can interpret a song differently, but even if you have different interpretations of it, I think sometimes you can hear a song and be like, oh, that makes me understand how this person thinks or experiences things.
I don't think in that respect. We've just had a lot of driving in the car with the windows down, singing bonding at the top of our lungs. Just bonding. Like, that is, music has always been that one thing that, like, even if we're like so mad at each other,
like, you can't be mad when listening to Taylor Swift.
Well, I feel like you could be, but it's just at somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we just that's just one of our favorite things to do is just drive around. She can now drive me around, so awesome. I can now be passenger princess,
and the Clancy decked out in Taylor Swift mobile.
Yes. So
I love that, because that is such an incredibly important piece to all of this as well. Find that person that you're closest to in life or extremely close with, and once you guys have worked on communication and trying to face these problems together, just find something you can do to build your relationship together, whether it's related or not, whether it's the craziest thing, whatever it may be. Find something to help build that relationship.
I think we just dealt with so much heavy stuff for a long time that it was so important for us to find things that had nothing to do with like getting her better or like working on our relationship, just like being together and like just doing something fun. Like one of our favorite things is always going to Home Goods and looking to see if they have any new stuff, and we always have to go back to the mirrors and take our mirror selfie. Like, that's just one of those, it's just so small and like insignificant to a lot of people, but like it's just one of those things that we have, because if we're at the house, we're probably just, she'll be on her phone, I'll be on my phone, or I'll be taking a nap, or whatever. Us just getting out and doing something just to let off steam and to just be together and not have to focus on the heavy stuff, because there was so much focus on that, was super important too. It's just kind of like getting back to, while we're both still doing the work, it's kind of getting back to like a sense of like normalcy.
Just being in the moment and able to live life.
Yes. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I have one more question for each of you, and it's a powerful question, but in a good way.
Okay.
But it may not be easy to answer. I always love to like capture the full idea of what the power behind all of these journeys can mean to each person. So my question, I'll ask you them both up front and then let you each answer them. Emma, I would ask you, like, what does it mean for you to know that you have a mom and parents that love you to the point that they are willing to support you and fight with you and learn and grow with you to be able to help fight some of the most difficult things you've ever faced in life? And what kind of confidence does that give you going forward? And Danielle, I would ask you, what does it mean to you to know you have a daughter that is so strong and has fought through things that so many people couldn't even imagine. And she's worked to grow herself and learn new tools, and she's built herself into somebody who is able to face quite a bit of challenge and overcome it.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
She's like, I need time to think. I am so proud of her. Like, she has fought through so many things that, like, adults have not even begun to, even if it's not on the level that she has fought through. But just like that self-awareness and the hard work that she has put into it, so many adults are not even there. And I just think that she is, I hate saying wise beyond her years, but she really is. And it's, I mean, how are we so wise is usually with experience. And she has had so much life experience at such a young age that I'm so proud of her. And I just think that she has endless opportunities to do whatever she wants to do, because she has gone through some really hard things at this young of an age. And she has really, it's not just about showing up to therapy or, you know, showing up to the conversations, that it's putting in the work. And she has really, like, fought hard to put that work in. And I admire her. Like, she's so far beyond, like, even what I am in a lot of respects, in so many different ways. Like, I think that, you know, we can learn so much from the younger generations, and I've learned so much by being a parent in general, but being a parent to somebody that has gone through something so hard.
Still trying to think.
Do you want me to talk slower?
No, because then my brain focuses on that and not the answer to the question. Like, it truly does mean a lot, and it gives, like, I don't want to say privilege, but I also, in a sense, I do feel privileged to have that, because I know that, like, not a lot of people do. Like, and also some might think they do, but then they go and try to open up, and then they realize they don't. So, like, knowing I have that, and, like, confidently knowing I have that, like, it makes me feel, like, very loved and special in a way, too, and very lucky as well. So, like, to have that support system, to have the mom, the dad, and the sister, the Holy Trinity there, to stand behind me and stand with me, like, in any battle I face, and be there to support me.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Well, I appreciate both your guys' times. Appreciate you coming back on to kind of talk about this situation, like, more in depth, and be able to provide even more tools and value to our listeners. And guys, as always, when you're listening to this show, the only thing we ever ask from you is, if you found value in this message, value in these lessons, please share it with someone you know who is battling the same situation in their life. You know, there's so many challenges that we face, so many different impossibles that are out there today. And maybe you fought through some of these yourself. If you feel like this conversation benefited you, please share it with someone else you know, because that's how we grow, that's how we spread this message, and that's how we provide as much positive benefit to the world as possible. And that's all we ever want to ask from you. So thank you guys for listening, and stay tuned, because we've got some more big things coming up soon. We've got some changes to the podcast we're making, some updates, and some very exciting things we're bringing you guys. We're starting to invest a lot more in this show, because we feel like it is our primary outlet currently to be able to help spread this message and give you guys as much value as possible. We got some big guests coming on soon, some great athletes, some great people who have battled some very difficult situations, and we are excited and honored for you to be able to hear their stories. But whatever platform you're listening to this on, whether it's an audio platform or whether it's YouTube, please subscribe, follow us, leave us a comment of what you'd like to see more of, and let us know, if there's anything that particularly touched you about this episode or any other episode. We love to hear from you guys. We always read our own comments. We always respond to them personally, so you'll be hearing directly from us. And if you guys have any questions at all, find us on www.impossibleperformance.com. You can see all of our resources there. You can access our apparel store through there. If you want to, be able to represent some of our message and our values and what we stand for, check out some of that stuff. And there's a contact form on there. You can reach out again to us directly, and we would love to talk with you and hear more about anything you're battling or any situation in which you need help in your own life. So you can find us on other social media platforms. I am at impossible.performance. Austin is at Austin_strength. And we're on TikTok, we're on X, we're on Threads. We're on every social media platform, including this new one, which is like TikTok, called Lemonade. It's a wild experience being on a brand new social media platform, especially one that's themed around lemons, apparently. But we like to stay current with everything. We like to jump on and spread this message in as many ways as possible. So wherever you'd like to find us, we've got links for them. Just reach out to us and let us know. And as Danielle and as Emma talked about today, there is always somebody in your life, no matter what you're battling through. There is somebody out there who cares deeply for you. There is somebody out there who wants you to win. They want to see the very best for you. They want you to achieve every goal you have for yourself in life. Remember that about people. Find that person in your own life. And if you don't think that person exists, just start asking around, start asking questions, and you will find that person. Learn how those people communicate. Find out how you can communicate with them, how you can work together to face the impossible in your own life, how you can grow to be impossible yourself, and how you can ultimately overcome that impossible challenge. That's what we're all striving to do, and we're all searching for that hope, that feeling, and that confidence that there is a light at the end of this tunnel. There is a positive outcome available to you. So thank you guys for listening. And as always, at Impossible Performance, we are striving to build a global culture of strength, fostering a spirit of growth in constant pursuit of the impossible. Take care, and as always, be impossible.